So there's a pretty concerning trend in American politics at the moment, among many others. But the one that I've been thinking about recently is the rate at which men and women are drifting apart from each other in terms of their political realities. Men and women have always voted differently. Women have had a tendency to always vote Democratic by quite a healthy margin, and men have always had the habit of voting Republican by a pretty healthy margin. But that's become massively inflated in the last 8 years or so. Now, where normally in traditional years, I'm talking like 2012 and before, you would see elections where men and women were differing by like somewhere in the range of like 10 to 20 points, as it were. Maybe like Republicans would be winning men by 8, women would be going for Democrats by 10 points. So like collectively the difference there was maybe like 18%. But in the last election in 2020, women went for Biden by 15 points and men went for Trump, for the Republican side, by 8. So that was a gender difference of upwards of 20%. And there was a poll just last month, I think conducted by NBC, which actually looked at the gender difference on a national level and found that in its polls, men were going for Trump by a margin of 12 points, 40 to 52. Women, on the other hand, were going for Harris by a margin of plus 21, 58 to 37, for a total gender gap difference of 33%. Now, there are a lot of reasons why that might be trending up, but I think probably the most obvious on the nose reason is the divisive nature, love him or hate him reality of Donald Trump himself. I've said before that Trump's superpower is really his ability to get passion out of people, whether it's extremely passionate hatred of him or extremely passionate love of him. Those seem to be the only two emotions he can really espouse, and it's remarkably different how men and women tend to respond to him. Trump, of course, has had decades of this like persona of like the sleazy New York real estate guy, and of course, let's not forget 2016, the Access Hollywood tape, bragging about groping women, and look, that's not even getting to what he did for reproductive rights or didn't do for reproductive rights when he was in office and the Supreme Court justices that he picked. But it all comes together in kind of a character that you can understand why quite a lot of women, a majority of women, find that quite repulsive. On the flip side of things, if you're a male voter and you don't really consider women's issues or reproductive freedom or anything as like part of what you consider when making your vote, Trump can be a funny guy who just talks shit all the time and is somebody who just like projects a much more like almost like 1950s really traditional sort of like what is masculine, like trying to project strength, never backing down, always pushing, extreme overconfidence, that sort of thing. So again, you have Trump's superpower in action here, the ability to make some people find him really appealing, and the ability to just frankly scare other people away. But of course, another big part of why that gap is growing is because of what Trump did to the Supreme Court and how that led to overturning Roe v. Wade, which is something that has energized female voters in a way that a lot of people wouldn't have thought possible. There are 13 states in America at the moment where there is no exception for rape or incest when it comes to getting access to an abortion. Those are states where millions of American women live who have lost the ability to access healthcare after being the victim of sexual assault. And that is directly because of Donald Trump's decision-making while he was in office. And we have seen it in action before in the 2022 midterms when inflation was approaching 10% and Joe Biden was incredibly unpopular. The Democrats only just lost the House and they made gains in the Senate because women's issues by the Republican Party were dragged into the spotlight and made a primary election consideration. And women acted on that. Trump himself even said, and I'm paraphrasing him here, but at one of his rallies, I believe he said that women love me. If it wasn't for the abortion thing, all women would love me. So even he's aware of the damage that he has done to himself when it comes to getting female voters on board. The reason I think that this specific like massive divide that's growing is important to look at is because men and women cannot just refuse to interact with each other. It's a pretty big part of culture and more broadly just the species that men and women do have to get along. Women will have to meet and interact with men at some point in their life, if not most days of their lives, and vice versa. Men unless they play Magic the Gathering, men on a daily basis will probably meet and have to associate with women. This isn't like an issue like rural versus urban, where people with different political beliefs live in different areas. This is something that people have to interact with every single day if it continues to spike in the way that it is. Women under 45 are one of the biggest voting demographics in the country. And they are a demographic. They are one of the few demographics that does not view economy alone as the top issue. Among women under the age of 45, the economy and access to abortion are tied in terms of what percentage of that group views it as the top issue. And I feel like that needs to be addressed. If one half of the country, if the male half of the country doesn't understand that the other half views this election fundamentally as about access to rights, to what they perceive as being a constitutional right that was taken away from them, that this election isn't just an issue of the economy or of jobs or financial security, but rather of fundamental rights, then that gap is not going to fix itself anytime soon.